Go. Okay, guys, welcome to session 3 of Thursday of the Global Hope Conference. We have a much demanded reprise by Marilyn Devonish. She is going to be talking to us about mediation and energy clearing because there's so much emotion in the world today. And this is one of the times whenever we need professionals like Marilyn to come in and give us guidance on how to manage these, because a lot of times in the modern world, we're told to suck it up as opposed to deal with it. And those are two big different statements. And she's going to teach us how to positively deal with it and how to make this world a better place through dealing with our own emotions. So thank you very much. And here, I'll turn it over to Marilyn.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Smith. That is just, it's so key and so relevant about what we're doing here. And you were talking in one of the sessions earlier, so I'm going to reference that as we go through as well, because what you were saying was really, really relevant in terms of how all of this works. And so let's pull up this, and I will make sure that you can see my screen. And there we go. Okay, great. This is going to be a topic which is a little bit different, I think, to what you've been maybe seeing previously. But as Dr. Smith-Meyer says, it's so vital. It has been vital for me in terms of the mediation and conflict resolution work that I've been doing, and also just in terms of human interaction and communication. So the session today is looking at how can you deal with stress and overwhelm. I'm going to take you through something that I call the waking meditation, which means you don't have to be lying down, asleep on the top of a mountain. You can do this in your office, in your car, walking to and from the bathroom, because sometimes that's the only break people get. We're going to do that as a guided experiential session for those who do want to take part in real time. If we've got a bit of time at the end, I might also add a few mindset tips and things that have helped me stay sane in some of these situations, and then a little bit about next steps and how you can keep in touch. My purpose for this session was to share with you, for me, what has for me been a 60-second route to instant calm, because there are times I'm on the ground, I'm in the moment, something has happened, and potentially something quite volatile. And what you need to do is just be able to calm yourself down, particularly if you're the project lead, as I often am, or you are the one doing the mediation, you're leading the session. People are looking to you as their point of reference. So this is a really great way to be able to do that. There's also a sense in what I call maintaining, getting that sense of equilibrium and peace. Because again, when you're in alignment, you can then you can focus your mind, you can focus your attention, you can bring your thoughts and your feelings into alignment. And from there, you can think straight. From there, you can make those critical decisions, and also dealing with those feelings of stress and overwhelm. And really, we are living in quite crazy times at the moment if you're watching this in real time. So one of the things that this often does for my clients is it helps them to deal with stress and overwhelm and a sense of confusion in a sometimes crazy and confusing world. So that's really kind of what I want to share with you today. Now, if you have questions, if you're live, you can put those into the chat. There is also a Facebook group, which I'm sure will be live beyond this event as well. So if you're watching this outside of real time, it's facebook.com/groups/global hope. And if you happen to be watching this a few months away from now, then you can always drop me an email, marilyn@transformationstm.com. And Marilyn is MARILYN, trans, TRANCE, and F for Freddie, FORMATIONSTM. It's in trademarks. So Marilyn@transformationstm.com. So that's kind of how we can deal with your questions. Now, during my first session, my first presentation for the Global Hope Conference, I looked at conflict resolution. I was looking at how do you resolve the unresolvable? And because conflict often brings stress, it brings tension, it brings anxiety, it brings anger, it brings frustration. And that can be coming from all sides, because oftentimes everyone thinks they're right. And so I was taking you through some case study examples for that. One of them was a standoff on an estate, what you would call in the United States the projects, and police were in conflict with the local gangs. The local residents were caught in the middle. The local authority, what we call here the council, were at a loss in terms of what to do. So they brought me in to mediate that particular situation. We also talked about the one with the rival gangs, where we're going to be starting a community radio station. What they didn't know at the start, having been killing each other, I mean literally killing each other with white chalk and everything, in terms of turning up at the office and finding someone had been murdered outside of the office. The plan was we had to bring both of those warring factions together and have them build the radio station together. And again, I was brought in as both the coach and also the mediator for the gangs. And I talked about during those situations that I had a secret ingredient. And I broke down some of the components of that in that first presentation. So if you haven't seen it yet, you may want to go and look it up. And one of the secret ingredients, which we're going to be talking about today, was the thing that not just helped me remain calm and focused and energized and switched on and aware of all of the components, it also has the same effect on the people who are in that scenario. And with the situation I talked about with the police and with the gangs and with the residents and with the local council, we had 4 hours to bring them together for the first time ever, turn the whole situation around and get them working collaboratively. And I won't tell you the outcome of that, it's in the first presentation, but one of the secret ingredients is what we're breaking down today. If we then add into that the current world context, lockdown, self-isolation, working from home, which brings a whole new set of just personal pressures. And I actually think working from home is going to be the way forward in the future. Add into that the whole thing about global unrest. There are threats at the moment to our health, family and loved ones, finances, livelihood, our work, our employment, freedom of movement, your sense of liberty. And also the whole situation that's facing us now, it's literally life and death. All of this brings with itself a whole set of pressures. Then layer onto that the grief cycle. Because if we talk about it in terms of the real world confines of what's going on now, COVID-19, people have lost people. They've lost family members, they've lost friends, they've lost colleagues. That plunges you into the grief cycle. If you look at the challenges in the wider world and what's happening on the global stage, people are losing their lives, often in broad daylight. That plunges people into the grief cycle, because oftentimes you will mirror what's going on. When you then kind of think, and now I've got to do my job and I've got to live and I've got to function, there is a lot going on. And this was for a particular scenario. I was doing a quick survey and a straw poll. I was asking people, how are you feeling about being in the world at the moment? People were talking about anger, frustration, they're exhausted, they're numb, they're traumatized. There's a sense of sadness, there's a sense of hopelessness, fragile, ignored, rage, injustice, heavy, fearful, inequality, guilt. When I looked at all of these things, I was like, actually, I know I'm talking here about quite an emotive situation. However, when I think about how people show up oftentimes when they are in conflict, and this could be something to do with conflict at work, a disciplinary action, a falling out even with a friend, these emotions here still come into play. So I ran a webinar for people who are feeling like this, using the secret ingredient we're talking about today. I did about 30 minutes worth with them. People saying they're feeling lighter, they're feeling calm, they're feeling relaxed, they can focus. So it works in a number of different ways. So today what I want to talk about is, how do you move from the whole thing about being in conflict to self-care, where you're looking after yourself, where you're getting yourself back into balance. A way to clear your mind if things have been piling in, or you're actually listening to the warring factions and parties, you're looking at all of the facts on the table and you're like, I don't even know what to do with that. And also for me, and this is where it gets very interesting, it is also a process that you can wake up and activate left and right brain. The reason that is important and vital, if you have to think, if you've got to make decisions, if you've got to do what I call the critical thinking and decision making, and you've got to be thinking in your feet, thinking in real time, getting clarity in the moment, because you don't have the luxury of walking away and thinking about it and coming back a week or two later. what you really want to be able to do is activate left and right brain, because you want the logical side working, and you also want to bring in that sense of creativity, because that's where sometimes your most innovative solutions will come from. It's not just about going back and looking at the patterns of what you've done in the past. And so the process I'm going to take you through today is really looking at how do you bring left and right brain together, activate that. And it's the whole piece that, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, where I said, I was bringing in a few elements of the photo reading accelerated learning, but it's about whole brain, whole mind learning. And the piece that we're talking about today is really about how to switch on your brain so that you're thinking more clearly. And doing all of that while you'll feel calm and while you feel relaxed. And it really does what it says on the tin. Clients are always completely surprised when it does work. And the key thing I would say is just have an open mind, because when your mind is open, I will be honest with you, I was very skeptical about some of the things I'm going to share with you today. However, thankfully, I at least haven't had an open mind, which means there's room for new information and alternative ways of doing things to sneak in. Now, before we kind of go on, for those of you I've never met before, just a very quick potted summary of who I am and some of the things that I do. I did a business degree. That was my when I was at university. So I did a business studies degree. I then did a postgraduate marketing diploma with the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I decided I was going to be a chartered accountant. So I was working for an investment bank in the city at the time. I gave that up to go back to study. Was very quiet and very shy. One of the reasons I was going to be an accountant is so that I didn't have to talk to people. Realized pretty quickly that a decent accountant will talk to their clients. And so I decided that I would sign up for what I thought was a communication skills course. It wasn't until I got all of the material back that I realized I'd signed up for something. I knew about the NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I hadn't realized about the hypnosis. I hadn't realized about this thing called timeline therapy. And I certainly had never even heard of this thing called HUNA, H-U-N-A. So I actually did try to get a refund. I said, there's been a mistake. This isn't what I signed up for. Can I have my money back? They wouldn't give me my money back, but said, come to the training. If you don't get massive value, you can have a refund at the end. The rest, as they say, is history. I went in one end really angry because it was several £1,000s and several weeks of my time. And at the other, came out the other side just completely wowed in terms of this is amazing. So then decided myself that I would continue on that journey. And over the years, I've had a number of different modalities to that, in addition to the management consultancy and the Prince 2 project management. And a lot of kind of what we're talking about here today then fed into that sense of confidence of being able to, go out and be public speaking, etc. All of that was happening while I had contemplated suicide. So when I say it was a complete transformation, that's almost an understatement. I started writing back in 2003 about emotional health and well-being, changing your mindset, working with people around stress, anxiety, all of those good things. In more recent times, I also write for the business press. So things like Huffington Post, Forbes, The Guardian over here in the United Kingdom. Long list, do a lot of interviews with the BBC, for example. So again, that's the other side of things, because in terms of management, in terms of leadership, there's always new information coming out and ways that you can frame this information so people really understand it, even in just a short space of time in the confines of a magazine article. And I've also been working as a management consultant and flexible working implementation consultant since 2003, which means helping organizations and their staff transition into remote working, flexible working and smart working, and have been working online and doing online coaching, online training, online therapy since 2005. So the new normal, which we speak of, is kind of my old normal. So that's a potted summary about me. And I always say to people, look, I didn't do a Lady Gaga, wasn't born this way. I was very quiet, very shy, lacking in confidence, very low self-esteem right up until the age of 32. So I'd lived all of my childhood, all of my teenage years, all of my 20s and the beginning of my 30s with a sense of self-loathing, feeling as though I was on the outside looking in. I was also diagnosed with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's in my 20s, and really had chronic fatigue where I was sleeping 12 to 15 hours a day. And nowadays, one of the things people most comment on about me when they meet me is my energy. So I know it is possible to change and transform and turn around even the most unlikely of situations. In terms of the conflict resolution that we spoke about yesterday, with the secret ingredients, one of them was this thing called HUNA. Now, Dr. Smith-Meyer was talking in one of the sessions earlier today, and he was talking about bringing in a progressive view from the outside. And when he was speaking, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what we're talking about today is beyond progressive. So we'll see if the audience is ready for that. And what I also will say is, in terms of what I'm about to share with you now, I was a massive skeptic when this information was first presented to me, because it sounded a little bit crazy that you could impact how you feel, and then when you feel it, you could then show other people how to feel that as well. One of the things I've seen it called entrainment, where you go into a situation and the person with the most dominant energy will then entrain the others to work in alignment with them. The way I've seen that in operation, even if you've not heard the term, I can go into an organization, I can either meet the CEO and the leadership team. I can tell you, if I meet the CEO and the leadership team, I can tell you what the team is like, or I can meet the team and I can tell you what the CEO and what the leadership team are like, just by meeting one or two of those. And I have to say, in the 17 years thus far that I've been a management consultant going into organizations, it's always spot on. Now, I won't share those observations, but I'll meet someone and say, okay, right, I can imagine, make my little notes, and it's exactly who I then meet. So even if you haven't heard of the whole thing about entrainment, you have probably met teams and met the managers, and you can understand why the team dynamic is the way it is because of the way the energy flows between those two groups and those parties. So what is this thing called Hawaiian Huna? In a nutshell, it's ancient Hawaiian healing practice. It is said to date back 35,000 years. It means secret or concealed knowledge. And it is a form of what they call self-empowerment, how to bring yourself back into alignment and how to get better communication, harmony, collaboration between you and whatever it is you are working with. It was outlawed from the 1820s right up until 1979. A little bit like the conversations that are happening now in real time with regards to slavery and colonization. When the Hawaiians were colonized by the Bostonians, they didn't understand their ways, they didn't understand what they were doing, and rather than understand what they were doing, they just decided to make it illegal because it didn't fit with their mindset, it didn't fit with their belief set. And that's one of the reasons why people maybe haven't heard of it. And it works with energy, works with symbols, works with the elements. We won't need to get into that. All I'm going to say is when I talk about symbols and the elements, if you've ever heard of something like Feng Shui, for example, you will find some similarities between these two things when I say about the elements and working with symbols, but that's a conversation for another day. The meaning of Huna means ho'o mana. Now, ho'o means to make. It's about your life force energy. And one of the things the Hawaiians surmised, and it makes sense logically, that the main difference between someone who is alive, someone who isn't, is their breath. When someone has left this earth, they're no longer breathing. So you could put a mirror up in front of their face, there'll be no breath on the mirror. So for them, a lot of it centers around the breath, which they call the life force energy. And they're very conscious about how they use their energy. Now, I did a live panel yesterday talking about race and racism, etc., and some of the things that I've experienced myself. And people were saying, oh my God, I can't believe you handled it like that. If somebody had said that to me, I would have hit the roof, lost my mind, da 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 da. And I said, one of the reasons why I am able to go into those situations is there's a thing in Huna called ho'oponopono. It means to make right. One of the things I'm always doing when I go into a conflict situation, I'm going to make it right within myself so that I don't inadvertently project my thoughts and my feelings and my mindset and my anger, frustration, whatever it might be, onto that situation, because I'm fully aware the energy that I take into the situation. Because oftentimes if I'm leading something, that's going to be the energy that people pick up on, and that will help to influence. It's not the only influencer, but it will be one of the components that then influence how things roll from there. So the whole thing about the energy that you carry, the intention that you carry, is so vital and so key. And oftentimes you could be thinking something, and sometimes people go, oh my gosh, I hope this doesn't happen, I hope that, and it's exactly what happens. It's almost like, so I just say, people, clean up your internal act as well. Go into it open, hold the energy that you'd like other people to be holding, and it will help to influence the situation that you find yourself in. But the whole premise of this is, how do we make things right? And that is why I really, really love it as a process that I bring into conflict resolution, because that's what it's often all about. How do we make this right? Even if we can't fix it, how do we bring it to some kind of conclusion, resolution, agreement, etc.? And that is the whole underlying premise of the Huna and the Ho'oponopono. My first experience of this, and I had to call it Huna magic because I couldn't think of what else to call it, because it was just, it just blew my mind. And I had, I was on the training that I was on, I was trying to get a refund. The guy asked for a volunteer. Now, I volunteered, not because I really wanted to volunteer. I volunteered because I was feeling a little bit facetious, because I'm collecting evidence so I can get a refund. Well, this was rubbish, and this didn't work, and that's nonsense, and well, that would never work, and that can't be true. So I'm in evidence gathering mode. So he asked for a volunteer. I put my hand up and he says, okay, is there someone you've got an issue with, like conflict, difficulty? And I thought, oh, family member immediately came to mind. The way I felt in this person's presence was that they always looked down on me, and I felt this big. So they said, think about the person, and they just carried on teaching the class. And every 15 or 20 minutes, they would say to me, how are you doing? I was like, you haven't done anything. Carry on teaching the class. 15, 20 minutes later, how are you doing? I was thinking, you haven't done anything. I'm doing the same. This went on for an hour and a half. At the end of that time, he then says, how are you doing? And I went to have a bit of a rant. And then I thought, well, actually, I'm thinking about the person that I had in mind. I now feel calmer about them. However, I reasoned that was because they desensitized me. They made me think about them for an hour and a half. Of course, you're going to take the heat out of the situation. One of the problems with this person was they would never call me. But if somebody said, how's Marilyn? They would say, well, I don't know, she never calls. And then that would make me really upset, because I'm like, well, you've got a phone and fingers. Why don't you put your fingers in the dial and call me for a change? So that was also one of the ongoing conflicts. I got home from the class that night. There was a voicemail from this person. I immediately thought something must have happened. There must have been some family disaster. So I phoned back, hey, is everything all right? Yeah. Okay, you called? Oh yeah, just wanted to see how you were. And at this point, I genuinely, because we had the old phone receivers, I went. Then they said to me, because I was studying to be a chartered accountant at the time, they then said to me, where have you been? And I just said, I've been out on a course. Now, that should have meant, because I'm studying with the ACCA, it's the accountancy body here in the United Kingdom, although they are global. So they really, when I said I'm on a course, they should have automatically thought she's on one of the ACCA courses. They then said, which course? And at this point, I took a deep breath. I thought, I don't want to lie. So I went with the most outlandish answer I could come up with. And I said, hypnotherapy. And then I waited for when are you going to focus? When are you going to get a proper job? When are you going to stop messing about? They were pregnant at the time with the twins. What she said was, oh, now she's a lawyer. And she's now a coroner and working towards being a judge. So you already know what that mindset is like and how logical and analytical it can be. She then said to me, oh, do you think hypnotherapy will help me with my morning sickness? At which point, my only thought was, she has been abducted by aliens, because there was no logical explanation for her turnaround. And since that day, she has been completely supportive of everything I do, even when it's a little bit out there. And this was 20 years ago. This happened in October 2000. And so that was where my curiosity was piqued with regards to this thing called Huna. I've then had clients. This was a client who was in dispute with a neighbor. And the neighbor had left a rusty old car partly on my client's driveway. So when my client had visitors, they had to partly park on the neighbor's driveway. The neighbor would then come out, there'll be an altercation, swearing, very tense situations, almost coming to blows. This went on for 9 months. My client phones me up one day, absolutely livid. I mean, he was, and so I said, okay, what's been going on? And we did the process that we're going to talk about today. The very next day, his wife opened the front door. She called him and she says, David, come here. So he's like, oh, what's happened now? He walks to the front door, the car's completely gone. And she knew that he'd done a session with me the day before. She's like, what is going on here? That story, we haven't got the time. I could give you a whole raft of those stories in terms of, and this was serious conflict to the point where my client was saying, I almost dread going out in the mornings and I dread coming home at night. Because having nearly a year of that, one of the questions people ask, because of course, many of you are going to be watching this as a recording, does this stuff work remotely? One of my clients had come to me, she opens a session, she walks in, she sits down, I said, what are we working on? I'd only met her the one time, we just did a 1-hour session. She said, I hate my boss, I hate my job, I'm being paid less than even the new interns, I've been there for 2 years. Hate my life at this point. I was like, okay. And I thought, what's the quickest thing I can do? So I did the thing that we're going to be part of the thing that we're talking about today. She then goes back into work and she calls me. She says, first thing she asked, what did you do to my boss? I said, I don't know your boss. I have no idea who your boss is. She said, I went in on Monday. My boss said to me, oh, morning, how was your weekend? Her boss had never said that to her. And then they had a genuine conversation, a good conversation about the weekend. So she's like, what just happened there? She then gets called into the office and says, can we have a word? And she thought, oh, here we go. Because normally when that happens, they were going to be tearing a strip of her, another unjustified reprimand. So she walks into the office, but feeling strangely calm. And they said, oh, we've been looking through the records and we realize you're being underpaid. So effective immediately, we're giving you a pay rise. It wasn't appraisal time. It wasn't pay review time. It wasn't anything time. It was completely random. And that's what my clients often say. What did you do to? And I was like, I didn't do anything to anyone. I'm just working with the client that's in front of me. But I know when we change the dynamic for them, the people that they're interacting with, oftentimes the energy will change between them. And that has happened over and over again. I've had it in situations where I've been, this is me on stage at a conference of 550 people here. And I did 5 minutes of what we are talking about today. And this is one where you get some of the most preeminent scientists and thinkers and quantum physicists and biologists and astrophysicists of our time. For those of you who know this world that I reside in partly, on the stage we have a guy called Greg Braden, we have Dr. Joe Dispenza, we have Dr. Bruce Lipton. And I just did 5 minutes collectively to the group. And I said to the group what I'm going to say to you. If you're open to receiving the energy, that's fine. Let it flow. If this is not your bag and it's not your cup of tea, just let it go over your head. I was there for 4 days. I was the host and the MC of the event. I could not walk 2 steps without somebody coming up to go, oh my goodness, when you did this and when you did that. I'm going to read a couple of them just in case it's a bit small on the screen if you're watching on a device. Somebody says, thank you so much for everything. The Huna and how beautifully you held the room and managed everything. Someone else says, I attended the 4-day TCCHE. It's the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution. I attended the 4-day TCCHE event a couple of weeks ago. And although I found the speakers fascinating, your Huna work had the most profound effect on me. Someone else said, I did speak to you at the event, brackets, in the ladies. I couldn't go anywhere. I'd be in the ladies' toilet. People were shouting over the cubicle, oh my God. So she was one of those people. And she said, and I explained how I felt the energy around me and a sense of calm. But since that time, I'm quite amazed at what has happened, because one of the things that people noticed, I'm big on the ripple effect, and the things that were kind of kick-started in the room continued for people several days, weeks, and months after this event, after that 5-minute burst of Huna. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor, and this is from one of my clients who's out in Australia. I'm in the United Kingdom, but you know, we do telephone and Skype coaching sessions. And she listened to a recording. It was an audio recording. This was in the days where I actually did teleseminars rather than video webinars. And what I realized last year, which was probably 3 or 4 years after this, she described the order and sequence in which I used the Huna symbols. The symbols was a whole different conversation. She had no idea what I was doing, but she was describing them exactly in the words that she was using, in terms of, she talked about the image of a red triangle. There is a symbol for the red triangle. She talked about feeling lighter and her heart center opening up. There's a symbol for opening up the heart center. Seriously, it blew my mind when I realized the correlation between what she had said and what I actually did on that recording, even though she was just listening to my voice. And to give you an idea, when I do the symbols, you draw them on the breath. So all she could hear was because it's about breath work. So it really is pretty mind-blowing. Those are some of the symbols, just to give you a sense of what they look like. And also, I've had clients who've been stuck with work, with contracts. Did a few minutes over the phone. This is a gentleman called Lack Loy. He's given his permission, as Pippa gave her permission to be named. He's called the White Collar Warrior because he works in the City of London in investment banking, and he also teaches martial arts. So his title is the White Collar Warrior. He'd been out of contract for 9 months. We did a few minutes of Huna over the phone. Very next day, contract out of the blue, one that had been, as he put it, dead in the water, suddenly came back to life. They said, can you start tomorrow? And he's been busy ever since, and this was probably about 6 years ago now. And I often check in with Lack. He's still busy, he's still working, the contracts are still coming in. And one of the things that he had said, he said, you're not going to believe this, because my clients say that a lot. And then he said, you have an amazing ability and it is having miraculous effects. So it works in very interesting ways. People sometimes also feel it physically if they are that way inclined. This was from one of my photo reading delegates she was joking and saying, you didn't tell me you're a doctor as well as everything else, in terms of just some of the things I said and the areas that I've worked on, knowing nothing about her at all. And the reason I always use it on the photo reading accelerated learning workshops, because it helps people change their mindset and change their beliefs in record time. And it also works, so people say, the placebo effect, because you know, that's where my logical brain initially went when I was learning this. I've even had it work with animals, to the point where the trainer is saying, I have no idea what's going on. They never like this with anyone. They never let anyone touch them there. They never let anyone do this. They never let anyone do this. And I rock up just to have a little bit of play, because I know animals can be quite sensitive to energy. And I felt really bad because the dolphin got in trouble a little bit, because the dolphin was supposed to work with everyone. And we were in a group, and I was the first person to get my picture taken because the dolphin just kept insisting when I was doing the Huna energy. And then the dolphin flat out refused to go to anyone else. He stayed with me the entire time. Our group session had to be cancelled, and we had to wait for the other group to finish so we could work with their dolphin. And also, just to say, what is out of shot of this is these dolphins, when they're not working and eating, they are out in the ocean. It's completely open. They just come back for food and for play, for those who are worried about the ecology. But the dolphin would not leave my side, and the trainer kept apologizing. I thought it's too much of a conversation to explain, so I just decided to go with animals sometimes like me. But there's no placebo effect there with the dolphins. I've never met the dolphin before in my life. So let's get into the waking meditation. It is something called Haka. Haka means to focus in and then to spread out. The Lao bit means to pay attention to the peripheral information. And this is said to be the, well, it is the waking meditation of the kahunas out in Hawaii. And also when you combine it with the breathing, this is where you also energize the body and energize the brain. So to put haka out in physiological terms, haka, peripheral vision. You can either be in tunnel vision or you can be in peripheral vision. When you are in tunnel vision, this is conflict mode often. You're in that fight or flight response. So the heart is going, the adrenaline is pumping, and people are either saying, I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight, or the fear response kicks in and we're going to run. The opposite of tunnel vision is expanded awareness, peripheral vision, or in Huna terms, hakalau. What happens when you're in expanded awareness is the parasympathetic nervous system clicks in. And that's where you have that sense. The parasympathetic nervous system is the body's natural relaxation response. And so you literally are flicking a switch. When you go from this to this, you're flicking a switch. The Lao, where we're talking about your focus, this taps into a part of the brain called the RAS, the reticular activating system. When you tell the RAS what you want, it's like a magnet, it's going to draw it to you. So when I talked yesterday about the conflict resolution, I said, I'm going into this. My intention is we're going to be breaking bread. It's a whole different story. And we are going to resolve this conflict. So now my brain is looking for ways to resolve the conflict. It's either going back through the data banks of what I already know, and it's also making new links and connections, because we're going to get that left and right brain going when we're on peripheral vision. And it's now bringing together new ideas as well. When you add that in with some sort of breathing practice, and you can just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. You don't have to get all fancy with the Huna breathing. What it does, now you're going to oxygenate the body and you're going to send oxygen to the brain, because when people are in stressful situations, and they're in tunnel vision, they often, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And they shallow breathe. When you shallow breathe, there's less oxygen circulating around the body. There's therefore less oxygen that gets to the brain. So the brain has to start to contract a little bit as well, which now means you can't think as straight as you do. And also it shuts down your ability to come up with creative ideas. And you literally get frozen. When you are in peripheral vision, what happens with that, for me to be in peripheral vision, I've got to have an awareness of what's on my left and what's on my right. For me to do that, my left and my right brain both have to work. And if you think back to your old human biology days where they talked about the brain being cross-wired, so what's happening on the left is also influencing the right, and what's happening on the right is influencing the left. When you're in peripheral vision, not only does it set off the parasympathetic nervous system, it also activates left and right brain. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I call the waking meditation to round off today's session. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to do it. My first thing, actually, because my throat is also going, take your own advice. If you have some water handy, I'd definitely say have a good drink of water, because you want to keep the system hydrated as well. So you take a deep breath in and you exhale. And just the act of taking a deep breath in, if anyone has done martial arts, any form of meditation, any form of relaxation, it normally starts on the breath. So on some level, we're almost hardwired and anchored, as we'd call it in NLP and neuro-linguistic programming terms. You're almost anchored into taking a breath. You're almost anchored into that state of relaxation just from taking a breath. Then what you're going to do, and you can do this eyes open or eyes closed, which is why I call it the waking meditation. Even if you had your eyes closed, you would imagine that your field of vision and awareness is opening up and expanding, because even just doing it in your imagination, that is going to start activating left and right brain, and you can do it with your eyes open. So I'm sat here at my desk. I just saw, even though I'm looking straight to camera, straight at you, I just saw a white car drive past my window, not because I turned my head to look at the white car, because I'm in peripheral vision. I can see what's going on my left and my right, and I saw the white car drive past, and I can see my exercise bike over there. You can also imagine that you looked look ahead of you and even imagine what's behind you, because now you give yourself a 360-degree awareness of what's going on around you. But just being able to look ahead and notice what's going on either side, that means left and right brain have to work. So deep breath, expand your field of vision. You then just start to notice what's on the periphery of your vision. There's another piece which in kind of the photo reading, where you're reading at 25,000 words a minute and photo reading a whole book in 5 minutes. It's brilliant for people who have got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and problems with concentration. One of the pieces that really helps them is this thing called the tangerine technique. And what that means is you have a fixed point of focus above and slightly behind your head. So if I'm going to lean down a bit so you can see that, but you'd have it about 6 inches above your head. It's imaginary, but you just imagine a point of focus above the head. Part of this is based on the work from someone called Ron Davis, who's written a book called The Gift of Dyslexia. One of the things that he found, people who are good readers, learners, and studiers have a fixed point of attention just above and slightly behind the head. People with things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, problems with focus and kind of concentration, they have what you call a roving point of attention. So their mind is here, and it's here, and it's here, and it's all over the place. So now it's very difficult to assimilate the data, bring the information together. He found that when he taught people to focus above and slightly behind the head, what happened is they could then focus on the task in hand, and it would also start to focus their energy. So in photo reading terms, it's called the tangerine technique. And it really is like an orange. It's just that tangerine is kind of a global thing. So you have that fixed point, and then you set your purpose, you set your outcome, you set your ideal intention. So in a corporate context, this is where you might be talking about goals, your targets, the outputs, the outcomes. In my daily life, I call it intention. When I'm teaching a photo reading class or running a photo reading webinar, we call it purpose. So whatever term you want to use, but when you put your purpose, your intention, your focus out in front of you, you then wake up the RAS, the reticular activating system, and everything clicks into gear. So what we are going to do is we're going to do, for those of you who would like to, we're going to do this as a guided process. And so my suggestion to you is make sure you're sitting comfortably. You can also do it lying down if you choose to, and not driving, of course. If you're driving or operating machinery, press pause, leave this till later, but just make sure you're sitting comfortably. And just take a deep breath in and exhale. And just gently relax your breathing. And you're just noticing the in-breath, noticing the out-breath, and just gently relax your breathing. And you're breathing at a rate and a pace which is comfortable for you. And whether you have your eyes opened or closed, just imagine that your field of vision and awareness is opening up and expanding now. So just imagine rolling your awareness out to the sides of the room and the place and the space that you're in, and even beyond that. And imagine rolling your awareness out to the back of the room or the place and the space that you're in, and even beyond that. And then imagine rolling your awareness out to the front of the room or the place and the space that you're in, and even beyond that. So that you now have a 360-degree view in your mind's eye about what's going on around you now. And that sense of being an expanded peripheral vision. And then bring to mind your representation of a tangerine. And you can imagine maybe holding it in your hand, moving it from left to right, right to left. And you might imagine the weight of the tangerine, the shape of the tangerine, even the color, the smell, the taste, the texture. And you imagine taking that tangerine and placing it above and slightly behind your head. So it's about 6 inches above your head. And you are creating a point of focus and that direct eye-mind connection, such that whatever it is you are now focusing on can make a lasting positive impression on your inner mind. And then you just imagine leaving that tangerine there, floating above your head in midair. And then maintaining that sense of relaxing your breathing, expanded awareness, fixed point of focus above and slightly behind your head. Just think about, what is the next task for you? What's your purpose? What is your intention? What is your outcome? What is your focus? And if you're in the learning environment, what is it you want to know? What is it you want to learn? What is it you want to take away from whatever it is you're reading, you're learning, you're studying? And just take a moment to put your purpose, your focus, your intention, your outcome out in front of you now. It's as though it's on a screen or on a whiteboard or on a flip chart, even a blackboard out in front of you. Because when you tell your mind and your brain what your outcome is and what you now want it to focus on, it will start to make those neurological connections for you and either bringing forth the information that you already know, and it will also now start searching for new ideas. And then maintaining that sense of relaxed breathing, expanded awareness, and that fixed point of focus and attention. You can take a deep breath in and exhale. And if you've had your eyes closed, you can now open your eyes. And then you just take a moment just to reorientate yourself and you just notice how you're feeling. Are you feeling calmer? Are you feeling more relaxed? Are you feeling a bit fresher and more energized? And that is something you can do in 60 to 90 seconds to absolutely change your own state. So I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening. I also want to say thank you to Dr. Chris and the team and the organization. Thank you to brav.org. And thank you also to the sponsors. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you all for the Global Hope Conference. I really hope you found that useful. If you would like to get in touch, my email, as I said earlier, is marilyn@transformationstm.com. The coaching and therapy and photo reading website is transformationstm.com. That's TRANCE, F for Freddie, so FORMATIONS, TM is in trademark, so transformationstm.com. For information about the flexible working, that side of things, that's www.flexibleworking.brizzy, B-R-I-Z-Y or Z-Y, brizzy.site, S-I-T-E, and my blog is marilyndevonish.com, and Devonish is D-E-V for Victor, O-N-I-S-H, and on social media, /Marilyn Devonish. On Instagram, it's the Neuro Success Coach. So thank you so much for your participation. I will now hand it back over to Dr. Smith-Meyer.
Excellent job. That was really informative. I really enjoyed the deep breathing stuff. And that was really exciting. And I thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow on some of the panels.
Absolutely. Thank you.